Hello, and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Hello, Warbirders. If you like these kind of videos, please show your love by subscribing, liking, sharing, with a super thanks, and or by joining the channel as a member of my crew. The inspiration for today's episode comes about because of a movie recently added to Netflix. It's the latest incarnation of Godzilla. This Japanese-made version was released in theaters in 2023 and is called Godzilla Minus One. The interesting thing for me about this Godzilla film is that it is set at the end of and immediately after the Second World War. And so there is a starring role for some World War II Japanese aviation. The film starts out showcasing some A6M Zeros or Zeeks being used in a kamikaze role, before the unit is disturbed by the arrival of the giant monster, and then whoever survives that is disbanded at the end of the war. For the full story of the Zero, I invite you to check out my full video on that subject. But during the middle to end of the film, which occurs after the war with the USA is over, but the war with Godzilla is just heating up, a very novel-looking fighter that has been held back from the previous hostilities is revealed in a hangar, fixed up, and plays a starring role. Was it real, or was it just some fantasy fighter dreamed up for the movie? Well, it was very much real, and so let's dive in and learn all about it. The unusual-looking fighter was the innovation of Captain Masuki Tsuruno, and he proposed it back in April 1943 to the 1st Naval Air Technical Arsenal. The novel features of the design were deemed to be interesting enough to explore more, so further work was funded, including the building of 2 gliders and a powered glider. The tests of these were so successful that by the end of 1943, the Navy authorized the Kyushu Aircraft Company to work with Captain Tsuruno to build a canard interceptor that was now to be known as the Kyushu J7W Shinden, which means magnificent lightning. So what were these interesting design features? The first is the concept of the canard. A canard is an airfoil that does the job of the horizontal stabilizer and or elevator, but in the nose section rather than at the tail. What is interesting is that some of the very first airplanes used canards, including the Wright Flyer, the Canadian Silver Dart, and the Santos Dumont 14B. Supposedly, the term canard, which is French for duck, comes from the 14B, which, if you squint at it, does look a little like a cubist duck sculpture. One advantage to a canard is that, depending on how it is mounted, it can either increase or decrease the longitudinal or pitch stability of an aircraft, which is the nose up or nose down movement. Also, by putting the means of longitudinal control on the nose of the aircraft, it allows for the engine to be mounted in the rear, which also has plenty of advantages. Also, a canard in front can aid in lift rather than adding downforce, which is what a horizontal stabilizer does, which would be helpful for an interceptor which needs to climb as fast as possible, to intercept. Performance is increased in other ways with the use of a pusher prop. Instead of turbulent prop wash being flung over the wings, fuselage, and empennage, you have clean and undisturbed air moving over these surfaces. There's no rotating prop wash hitting the tail fin to deal with, so not so much rudder input is theoretically needed on takeoff. Visibility is improved without the engine and the whirling prop in front, and you can easily put more and concentrated armament in the nose where the bullets and cannon shells will be coming straight out forward without having to deal with shooting around or through a propeller arc. Finally, pushers can be safer for the pilot. The hunk of metal, which is an engine, acts as armor to protect him from an attack from the rear. Also, all that hot metal and fuel and oil and stuff is located behind him. During an engine fire, rather than the airstream blowing all the fire in his face, it'll actually be burning away and behind him. One, in quotes, tiny problem that all pusher planes have is the spinning meat chopper back there if the pilot ever has to bail out. We don't want to have the pilot hit the fan when the poop hits the fan. Over the years, designers of pusher planes have solved that problem by having devices to jettison the prop, blow off the blades, or eject the pilot, either up and over the meat grinder or through the floor and below. You can see plenty of examples of these designs in my Doomed Fledglings series. So construction of the first two prototypes began in June 1944. The power plant chosen was the Mitsubishi HA-43, which was a 18-cylinder, twin-row, air-cooled radial engine capable of churning out an impressive 2,200 horsepower. It was buried behind the pilot, along with its supercharger, and was shafted to a 6-bladed propeller. But it must be said that Captain Tsuruno had always hoped, and indeed planned his design so that a turbojet engine could be installed in there instead. We've talked about longitudinal stability and control, but what about directional? Instead of having one vertical fin and rudder, in the Shinden, it would be divided into two of them, one on each wingtip, as was tried on the American Curtiss-Wright XP-55 Ascender. Not having a pesky engine in the nose allows for a lot of weaponry to be placed there. The Shinden was to have 4 30mm Type 5 cannon with 60 rounds per gun, perfect for knocking down B-29s or pissing off giant radioactive reptiles. It could also carry some small bombs too, but this was not to be its main role. The first prototype was completed in spring 1945, but there were problems with keeping the engine cool during ground runs. It's not hard to see why. While on the ground, the fuselage buried, air-cooled engine just wasn't getting sufficient air to do the job. But even before the prototype flew, the Imperial Japanese Navy was so impressed that it ordered 150 machines a month. Of course, Japan's aviation industry was in shambles by this point, and this number was pure fantasy. But what was not fantasy was the Shinden. It actually flew. On the 3rd of August 1945, Captain Tsuruno himself made the takeoff from Mushiroda Airfield. Results were good, with about 2,600 feet per minute climb rate and a maximum speed of 470 miles per hour. There were some problems with a powerful torque pull to starboard, flutter of some of the propeller blades, and some vibration in the extended drive shaft. These probably could have been worked out in time, but time is what they didn't have. There were 2 more short test flights, ironically, one occurring on the day Hiroshima was bombed and the other on the day Nagasaki was hit. No more than 2 prototypes were ever built. One was scrapped, while we are lucky that the other was dismantled by a U.S. Navy Technical Air Intelligence Unit and shipped to the United States, where it now resides at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center Annex of the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about the other, in quotes, surviving Shinden. Please note my tongue being firmly planted in my cheek. That one was pushed away in a hangar and covered with a drop cloth and ignored until needed by a desperate Japan that this time wasn't fighting against the might of the USA, but against the mighty Godzilla. So how did this Shinden perform against the giant radioactive reptile? I will report that the CGI is well done and the flying sequences are fairly realistic and fun to watch. As to who wins in this combat, well, you'll just have to watch the movie. Canards went out of fashion, but then suddenly became all the rage again, especially in the world of supersonic jets. The North American XB-70 Valkyrie and the Soviet Sukhoi T-4 had canards that resembled goofy ears. Soon many fighters, including the Saab 37 Viggen, Dassault Mirage, Israeli IAI Kfir, were all sporting canards. In the meantime, even some civil aircraft took up the trend, including Burt Rutan's Very Easy and Long Easy and the Beech Starship. Canards seem to be a continuing, must-have accessory on the modern aviation fashion runway, continuing to this very day with the Dassault Rafale, Saab Gripen, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and Chinese Chengdu J-10, J-20, and the Sukhoi Su-34 and Su-33s. So that's it for today, but if you liked the video, please show your love by subscribing, liking, sharing, with a super thanks, and or joining the channel as a member of my crew. Join the conversation by commenting. Until next time.